Hello and welcome to my first tutorial. First of all, I wanted to thank you for supporting me here on Patreon, and I hope you can learn a lot from this. Also, requests for future tutorials are always welcome. And I was thinking for a while where to start, where to begin, and I was thinking that it would make sense to start with my workflow and how I blend, how I paint in general to start. So yeah. For that, I wanted to show you how I start. So first of all, whenever I do a painting, whenever I create something new, I create mood boards. And that is for helping me, having a guidance to plan things, to put in references. And for that, I usually use this software that is free to use, by the way. It's named PureRef. You can easily download that, and then I drop my reference pictures in there. I'm gonna show you an example of a mood board. For example, we have this painting I did a while ago, and you can already see how the mood board is related to the final drawing. So yeah, first of all, when I get to draw, I plan what my drawing will be. Mostly I get requests or commission works, so I already have a direction for my drawing, and then I create my mood board fitting to that. There I put all my references in. Why referencing? References are important so you can rely on a source and you don't have to know everything. Also, you can increase your knowledge by having real-life pictures. It's important to not reference from other artists because you can't just copy someone else's work. However, if you take your own pictures or if you change them enough from photographs, that should be fine. So yeah, just that for a reminder. And now I'm gonna show you where you could find some reference pictures, for example, and how to build your own mood board before drawing. So you can see in this drawing I had many colorful elements, and I wanted to bring in the pink of the flowers and combine it with some greens. I will talk about color theory later on. So usually I go, for example, to Pinterest or Google and drop in some reference pictures, as you can see here. Also on the top left, that's me, that's why I didn't blur the face out. And yeah, you can reference everything, colors, a pose, anatomy. It's really important that you have more than you already know, so you can increase your knowledge with each painting, having your so you don't rely only on your visual library, you know. Otherwise you could learn mistakes, because sometimes when we draw and something seems off, it's not always off. For example, we just think it is, and our brain usually tricks us a lot. So using reference is really important. So we have here some flowers, for example, and yeah, you can bring in portraits and everything. And for the first assignment for this class, I wanted to also have a drawing, a study, and yeah, starting with a mood board and then build on that if you want to practice. Anyway, this is like the first step. I take my reference pictures, I create a mood, I see what colors do I want to use. In this case it was really colorful because it was supposed to be a happy painting, and I combined hair color with a third color, which was green in this case. So yeah, first step, mood board. Get your idea done, get your references before you even start painting. Planning prevents you from going lost while drawing, and sometimes looking for a mood board and creating one gives you new and better ideas as well. So what I usually do afterwards is I do my thumbnails or sketches. I'm gonna show you some. For example, see, we have some color, some value sketches with the poses that I did for my client. And as you can see, I started with experimenting a bit after having my idea and request. I started with some half-body sketches, since it was a half-body commission, with some variations for the bodies and poses. I do that because when you have more variations, you can pick the best at the end, and it's usually that the first sketch and drawing is not the best. So I also recommend, before you start painting and drawing, that you start warming up before you draw. You can do that with figure drawings. You can go to YouTube, for example, and look for free figure drawings, and then you can practice for some minutes so that your hand gets used to drawing and it's not so stiff and you don't get frustrated easily. So that's something I also do before I start painting. And then when my hand is warm, I do some thumbnail sketches, as I said. Here, when I'm not sure about the concept, I also have sometimes variety in colors and everything, just to experiment. The best place to experiment is before you start rendering, in the sketch phase, because then you can easily change everything and you didn't render it for so long and get frustrated at the end. So can only recommend doing that. That's what I usually do in my workflow as well. Planning is important, see how everything looks as a composition. And what's also important is that you don't zoom in. Especially at the beginning, you just have to look, how are the shapes interacting with each other? Do you like the colors? And spend some time on the planning. I know it can be dry, but it can save you at the end. And I can only recommend doing that. When I was younger, I didn't do that before I knew much about painting, and I ended up rendering artwork sometimes for hours and hours and didn't even like it. So yeah, here's another example for thumbnails. This time I was playing with colors mostly, as you can see. And yeah, same goes here. I was looking, how do the shapes look with each other? Do I like the colors? And yeah, so you can push your composition at the beginning, and it's always a good way to get a better result. I can show you the final drawing now. I posted it earlier this month as well. It was this one at the end. You can see from the thumbnail to the final illustration, it's pretty much the same from the shapes, you know. Besides of the hair, I was supposed to change that for the person that got this painting. However, I usually take it from the pose and everything. I don't change much in the composition of the final drawing. It's all rendering from there. So yeah, if you put in some extra time here in the planning, you're already saving a lot of time on the long term. That's what I say my students in class as well. Can only recommend that. So yeah. So we have, I'm repeating, we have first the thumbnail, the planning. Then we do little thumbnails. We don't zoom in, really important. We experiment a bit if we're not sure about the project, see if we can push the colors and everything. And then, once you, let's say you're happy with your drawing, what I do afterwards is I start rendering, like, and I'm gonna show you how I blend, how I do that. Yeah, you can see, so you should really take your time at the beginning with your planning before you start with the details. And yeah, wait a second, I have a good example for that. Okay, so here's an older tutorial. If you want, you guys, I can translate it to English as well. However, I'm gonna show you. So this is another example. We have a thumbnail. I check if the gray colors are okay, grayscale. With what is important is to have different values and that everything is readable. However, this is a rather old piece and I think the values could have been pushed a bit more. If you want to get a black and white, you can easily use a filter. I'm gonna show you in Clip Studio and in Photoshop afterwards which filter it is. And you can see since the beginning I was already planning the colors. I will do a separate tutorial for color theory because it's a big subject. But yeah, I wanted to start with this first. So yeah, first we have the thumbnail, everything's planned, and let's say I'm happy with it. What I do next on a good day, sometimes I also get confused within my own workflow. That happens. However, so it's important to repeat these steps so you get used to it. So let's say I'm happy with the image, and what I do next is I start rendering. However, I don't zoom in. The image itself is really small on the canvas. Reason for that are, first of all, you don't focus on the details yet. You are not supposed to focus on the details yet. That's something you do at the end. Details are not that important as well. And I focus more on the shapes and colors and how everything works together. So yeah, not zooming in is also a big time saver. So yeah, this is like 30 minutes, really quickly done. And what I also did was bringing in the darkest value around the eyes. Why I did that is to bring the focal point there, to have the viewer look at the eyes, and everything else is also less detailed, giving the same effect that the focal point, the most important part of the painting, is detailed and people actually look at it and don't get the eyes somewhere else. So that's also important. After that I just do a little bit more of rendering. And this is a quick thing to do, like, it takes practice, of course. However, if you keep these steps in mind, you can save a lot of time. So here we have some more color theory, I will talk about that later. So okay, and afterwards we have the same drawing, and here what I've done next was playing with colors. You can see it's much more intense. I will show you the filters I used in Photoshop, and just to push it, and then I put it in multiply less percent just to push the image, and you can see some more details are coming in. However, I wasn't zooming in too much yet either. This is something I do at the end. So these are the filters I use, but I will show you in the video. So yeah, basically what I do afterwards is play with filters, do my final effects, and bring in some details, but just a tiny bit in the face, and you can see it's still not very detailed. Like when we zoom in the eye, it's still rough. However, from far away it looks fine. So that's something also to keep in mind. You don't have to zoom in and render everything very nicely, because when you zoom out it blends in anyways. So, and also it can be too much easily. So yeah, the only thing I rendered was the face. You can guess why. It's the focal point. I want people to look at the face, and everything else is really roughly done, especially around here. And it gives a really flowy effect to the whole painting as well, which I liked. And so yeah, that's pretty much it about my workflow. Let's repeat everything again. First of all, mood board, get your ideas done, plan them, do some thumbnails. Stay zoomed out. Just zoom in at the end, like when your picture is done by, let's say, 85%, then you're allowed to zoom into the focal point and do some details if you like. That's at least how I work. And yeah, try to not overdo it with details. Focus more on the shapes, colors, and composition, and then on the details at the end. That's basically it about my workflow. I hope it was easy to understand, and now I'm gonna show you how I blend, because that's also a big part of my workflow and art style in general, how I blend and how I paint. I was thinking before the blending, I also want to show you in which canvas size I usually work in. You know that my main program is Clip Studio Paint, and that is because the blending here works really nicely. However, my technique is also possible on Procreate or Photoshop. It's the same for everything. It's quite simple actually. And yeah, it's the first time, besides off in class, that I show people how this works. So I hope you enjoy it. So first of all, I work on really big canvases. That's because I want to print my artwork eventually, and for that you usually should use a resolution of 300, and yeah, I use like 6000 and 6008 in width. However, you can make it bigger or smaller, depending on if you want to use it for printing. However, I don't recommend doing it below 2000. It's gonna be pixelated and you don't want that. Low resolution, low quality, make it bigger. So yeah, I work on big canvases, that's like the first thing. And now I'm gonna show you which brushes I use. And as I said, it's really simple. I am always happy with 3 sorts of brushes. I'm gonna use cyan because it's my favorite color. Cyan is beautiful. So I like to work with a sharp brush. For example, the G Pen, you can download it in the Clip Studio shop, it's for free, or was it a real G Pen? It doesn't matter. One sharp brush, can even use the default ones. Same for Photoshop and other programs. One soft brush, which is also default on each and every software. And usually a square half soft brush, which will be used later on. And then I also like to use the watercolor brush, which is great for blending, as you can see. However, I can show you different ways of blending. And yet it's basically it. Like, if I have these 3 sort of brushes, I can go on and work. It's easy, I know, but I think the easier the workflow, the easier the technique is, the better, because drawing is something really complex. And some of the things that I've learned through the years is trying to take this complex thing and making it as simple as possible will only benefit you. Of course, we're not breaking every rule there is. However, we can take rules such as color theory or workflow, that is kind of a rule as well, and try to make it really simple so our life is easier. Okay, enough about that. I'm gonna show you how I blend things. So I'm gonna do a little face as an example for you guys. Of course, you're gonna have some nice sharp ears. We all love elves, right? And for this practice, please use a reference. Alright, and try to not just copy the reference, but to also understand the shapes and focus on the shapes rather than the objects that are displayed. This is also the homework, aka assignment for this class, to do a blending practice. So okay, so how I work is I take the sharp brush. Wait, I'm gonna write it down so it's easier. Sharp brush. Oop. Soft brush. Half soft. I don't know, I'm gonna say it half soft. Okay, just for so you don't forget it. I think it's easier. Also, you can, if you like, write some of the things down that I say, so you have them as notes. Writing things down always helps you remember them better. But you can just rewatch the video as well. It's up to you. I personally like, whenever I'm learning something, to just watch and draw along. So I hope you like doing that too. So yeah, also in my painting technique, sometimes I use lines when it comes to poses to see how the gesture is going, but usually I don't work with lines much. You can see it's more about shapes and forms. So yeah, here we have the main form of the head. Let's give her some nice cyan hair, because we can, right? And yeah, if we have like a reference, let's say we have one, it's important that we focus on the shapes. Maybe I can find a reference that is like, wait a second. I'm just gonna take photos of myself. I would not like to have photos of someone else in my tutorial. I hope that's fine for you. Just gonna take myself. It's not the best reference, honestly, because it's blurry. We don't have interesting lighting or anything. However, just for having the example. There we go. Right. I mean, it's the same perspective for the head, so it should be fine. Okay. Let's bring this down. Also, little side note here, good references are usually good in quality. We're talking about at least 3K, or you can see everything clearly. Good lighting and interesting lighting, so we don't have only frontal light, which can be really boring. And yeah, always look out for that. Once I've read a book that said your drawings are just as good as your references, so yeah, try to keep that in mind if possible. So I'm just gonna reference myself in this case, just changing the hair color. Even though I really like pink, I'm into cyan today. There we go, big brush. When we're in the blocking in phase, I sometimes forget it myself, however, you should not do my mistakes. So use a big brush, big shapes. You can see how clean it is right now. That will change quickly. So yeah, try to keep it short, so so it's not too long. However, still try to teach it the best way I can. So we have the main shapes. I can paint them over. Here we go. In this case, it's this and this. So yeah, we're trying to focus on the shapes, not the details yet. Try to ignore them. I know it's hard, especially at the beginning. However, you will get used to it after a while. So yeah, main shapes are in. Let's bring in some dark shape down here. And I'm just referencing it, I'm not copying it, so as you can see the shapes do have some variations. Alright, now it's time for the blending. I wanted to show you that originally, right? So, for the skin, I like to go with a pinkish tone for the shadows. We go to the blues, direction. So this is like the warm skin tone, and for the shadows usually I go down in the color wheel and go down in the colors, in the shadows of course. So this one got a bit dark, but yeah, as I said, I would like to do a tutorial on color theory because it's a big topic. But yeah, just to keep that in mind, that is because usually a daylight scene we have the reflection of the sky, which is really bluish, so shadows usually are more towards blue in the color wheel. Side note, and the warmer tones which are exposed to the sunlight are usually warm because of the sun. In this reference I was in front of a monitor, and because of that the light itself is rather cold, which is unusual. Alright. So as you can see, I block in the face. The upper lip is usually darker than the underlip. Another tip on the edge. That is because it's usually more pigmented, and it is on the shadows as well. Same for the eye socket, it's in the shadows, so we're gonna paint that in. And we're also having the light source from the right. It's really important that you keep in mind where the light source is coming from, so you know where to paint in the shadows. So yeah, in painting in general, it's really important that you have shapes in mind, shadows and forms instead of lines and symbols. So. And now to the blending. I usually like to use the watercolor brush for that. And it's really easy. You just go over softly with your pen. Then you pick some of the lighter color and you blend. You can use a thicker brush. And you blend that in. That's how I usually start. I hope everything is clear and easy to understand. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I will come back to it and answer all of them. I'm really thankful that you guys are my patrons and are supporting me this way. It's not easy as artist, however you make it easier for me. So thank you very much about that. Alright, you can see I'm blending it in easily and it's already starting to become a shape, you see? That's the magic behind painting. I really love it. And yeah, you just blend it in like this. Another way of blending, if you don't have Clip Studio, for example, but in Procreate it's the same. Oops. You can, for example, for some shadows, go here with the lasso tool and go back to airbrush, so we have the soft brush again. Then we take a darker shade and I'm going into the purples now. It's a bit overdone. Real colors are not that extreme, but since I work stylized, I can push the colors a bit. And we go with a round brush around the places where the shadows should meet. And voila, we also have a nice soft transition. There we go. The same thing we can do with the lips. To create a hard edge. And nice. So what I usually do afterwards, let's say we bring in some more color here and shadows. Also we can use the reference again and see where the shadows are, but I changed the light source, so it's not too useful. In that regard, you shouldn't do that, by the way, when you're starting and learning. Don't change the light source at all. So I take my square brush or my square and pointed brush at the end for details. For blending things in softly, I go like this with the brush, like softly going over the edges, as you can see, and taking the darker shade, going up here, and we already have a semi-rendered lip. You see, I'm picking some pinks for the lips. Pink and blue usually work together really nicely. So let's do that. For the light part, going lighter here. So yeah. And yeah, for the assignment you can do the same. Take a reference picture and practice blending. So at the end, as I said, I'm taking the sharper brush and I'm going over the edges. Now let's go and give her some eyes, because it's starting to be creepy, right? So for that I'm taking a lighter shade and paint in. I would like to do also tutorials in the future about each part of the face, because that's more to it. However, I think for my art style it's basically the most important to understand how I blend and everything. That's why I want to start with the workflow and how things go, to make it easier for you guys, because I think it's like most important. So there we go in and paint in the eye. I also recommend to flip the image as often as you can to see mistakes. There we go. We can take the soft brush again and put in some shadows on the edges, because the eyes are round and it has shadows. This part of the eye is never pure white because it's in the shadow region. So, a side note here. Let's bring in, oops. Again with my hard brush. Should we give her some blue eyes? Isn't that boring? I'm gonna give her pink eyes. There you go. Yep. And here it's good if you have your reference to see how it's placed and where to put what in. There we go. So, and afterwards I do my blending more, but I want to keep it short. So I'm gonna take in the darker color now. There you go. And the lashes. Again with the round and hard brush. I love to use that for my lashes. Upwards. There we go. And it will be less creepy in some seconds. Fixing some mistakes here and there. Bringing in some more shadows. Then you can already see how it starts to become a face. Give her a nose. So yeah, this is basically how I draw. Let's repeat it again. There we go. The next comes more values, fixing of mistakes, bringing in harder shadows, up, and at the end we can bring in some texture. And we can now as well bring in some more highlights. But first of all, I'll give her some blushies with a hard brush again. You see, I do use the same brushes all the time. And these are usually default brushes. It's really easy to find them. There are some highlights on the right side. Yeah, this is basically how I paint. And this will be the assignment as well. I would like you, if you want to practice this, take a reference picture, as I said earlier, and practice blending. See how you can work with shadows and light, and try to focus on the forms. So yeah, this is my example for that. Of course, then I would take a lot of time rendering, and I zoomed in more than I should. I'm sorry about that. But you can also experiment for yourself. This is how I work, and you can see what you like about it and how it works with your workflow. Take some parts of it and experiment. You can also try different brushes and see which way you like to work best. This is how I got my own workflow over the times, and yeah, it's all a trial and error. That's basically how I do the blending. I can show you another example with the hair. We get the watercolor brush again, and yeah, you see how it gets flowy and everything. That's why I love Clip Studio, by the way. This is something you see in my art style a lot. Oop. So, and the question is, what do you do after you've done this simple, or the first steps is you render, you look at your reference, you see how can you push it further, bring in darker shadows and highlights and some textures. For example, for the skin we could take a lighter color and bring here some shining elements, or give her some freckles. But yeah, this takes time, which is fine as well. Giving her some highlights. And now I'm gonna show you the effects I use, as I said earlier. So for example, I really like color dodge. It's really useful. Let's say we take a nice blue and bring it in here. See how nicely the colors become, especially around the eyes. And I also experiment a lot. I usually, before I finish a painting, go through all the different color modes and layer options there are and play around. And now I'm going to Photoshop, because that's where I do most of the editing at the end. So I'm gonna take a screenshot here, show you. So there we go. Hello Photoshop. Okay, never mind, that didn't work again. What's going on? There we go. So, what I do at the end, these are my favorite things to do, which are very typical for my art and art style. I first of all create a noise brush. It's in filter, where you go to noise and then you get to add noise. And then I go to one layer option when I click here and experiment and see which one do I like the best. I think I like this one a lot. It gives a lot of texture, which I like, and then I set the opacity down to like 4%. You can see it when you zoom in, but it's really softly. Otherwise, what's also something I like to do, merge visible, duplicate. I soften the image, and when I go to filter and blur, Gaussian blur, I soften the image, and then I play again with the filter, the layer options. You can go through it and see which one you like the best. And you can also do this more than once and experiment. I kind of liked this, and then again I change the opacity down. It's already cool. I like the colors that it gives, but you also can go here to this half circle that is half white and half black, and there are more options, like you can change the brightness and contrast. You can also go and to vibrance. This is something I do a lot as well. I push the vibrance at the end so the colors are more intense. I like intense colors. You can even change the saturation, but yeah, let's not overdo it. We can also use photo filters. and so on. I recommend you experiment with it. And also curves are really useful when you, for example, make the darks too black. You're not supposed to use pure black. You can easily fix it in this option. And when you use whites, which are not supposed to be used either because these are not natural, you can also fix it here quickly. So another tip there. What I also love to do at the end of my drawings is I duplicate the layer. Also, I don't work with layers much. I merge them all the time because I blend them, which makes sense, right? But to not lose any process, I recommend to duplicate your layers as often as possible, so you can always go back. So yeah, what I like to do is I go to the channels and then I select Control and A, sorry, and then I shift. You can see it's already creating this. And then again with the green, A and T to move it. And same with blue, A and then Control T to move it. And then I go back to RGB and delete the places where it's supposed to be focused. And of course here on the right and left, deselect. Oop. There you go, we have a nice effect, but I'm gonna put it to opacity, let's say 40% or something. So there's also a way to make things blurry. I know it's really soft in this case because the drawing is not detailed, but it does make a difference and make things blurry at the edges. I really like that effect. You can also do this, which I like to do is a blur, Gaussian blur, for the edges, so you can bring in more focus on the focal point again. You can see it's really nice. I use it a lot, especially for backgrounds. So yeah, that's basically it. And for highlights, you can use color burn or color dodge. Here we go. For example, you want to bring in some more highlights in the eyes, on the lips. So yeah, another example for that. That's basically it. These are the main things I do when drawing. Plus effects, you see how desaturated it is in contrast now. So going in and pushing everything at the end really does make a lot of a difference. So that's basically it with my workflow and my blending technique. So I hope this was useful. For the assignment that I give you guys for practice, if you like, is as I said, take a reference picture, for example a portrait or anything you like, and then do a quick study of it using my blending technique. If you don't have Clip Studio Paint, it's okay, you can also blend in Photoshop. How that works, you can use this finger tool, and it's also for blending. And same for Procreate, you also have a blending tool there. If it doesn't work for you, you can also use the soft brush for blending, which I really like. Here we go for another example. And then you pick the color in the middle, you can blend it really nicely. So yeah, so I hope it works for each program. If you have any questions or if I said something too fast, please write it in the comments and I will go and answer everything. Thank you so much, and I really hope you liked my first tutorial and I hope you learned a lot. For the next tutorial, please tell me what you would like to learn next. As I said, we can go through the face, we can go through color view, whatever you like. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope you liked it and see you next time.